Welcome to the lab. We are the CineFiles, and today we are presenting for you, I am not going to speak like that throughout the rest of the show. We are presenting for you Universal Horror. This is our epic episode, shooting live from our lab in Transylvania or something. Actually, more like Von Bushwick, right? But before we continue, I just want to introduce you to my co-host. We've got, at the end here, we've got Count Jeffrey Von Galashaw. We have the lovely Elsa Lola Rock'n'Rolla, and I'm Eric Cohen. And so let's discuss Universal Horror. I'm so excited to do this because I'm a huge fan. Well, Universal Horrors, I mean, the Universal Studios came up with these iconic monsters that have inspired and influenced horror movies to this day. And Universal, they're technically, I guess, their first horror film, I checked this up on the internet, was a version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in like 1913 or something like that.
Nosferatu?
No, Nosferatu wasn't Universal.
Oh, you're talking about Universal.
We're talking about Universal. Universal really, there's like the actor who played Jekyll was called King Baggett, and another actor played Hyde. Yeah, I don't know. Apparently, if you look hard enough, you can find this. But it wasn't until the 1920s, and they brought on Lon Chaney Sr., where they became an institution in the kind of horror things. It all started off with a production of Hunchback of Notre Dame, which in itself is an iconic character, creature type, usually lumped in with the Universal monster stuff, but isn't really a monster.
Still freaks me out with that.
Yeah. Well, Chaney was an amazing actor, an amazing makeup artist. Phantom of the Opera came out after that, and that just blew the roof off.
That one I've seen.
Still scary.
Now, we're moving fast. We're going to fast forward to the early 30s. Two films are going in production at the same time. One is Dracula, one is Frankenstein. Now, we're going to talk about Dracula first. Todd Browning, who directed a lot of films with Lon Chaney, also directed the fantastic Freaks.
A movie I'm still scared to watch.
Yeah.
No, it's awesome. It's really, really good. It's really good.
One of us.
It's Todd Browning's best sound film.
Okay.
He did some great silent films with Lon Chaney. And he did Dracula. He was tapped to do Dracula. It was rumored that Chaney was going to do Dracula. There was this whole myth about how Chaney came up with his own makeup, and no one knows what that is. It died with him in his grave. It's just a rumor. There's no real proof that he was going to do it, especially when this version of Dracula was actually based on the stage play, not Bram Stoker's novel, and there's a considerable difference. The book is considerably more epic in scope. It's from the point of view of many different characters, and whereas the movie Dracula, which became synonymous with telling the story of Dracula for several decades after that, was actually based on a play.
Really
Bela Lugosi,
Yeah.
a Yugoslavian actor, or Hungarian actor, sorry, different
Yeah.
country, who had played the role on the Broadway stage.
He was supposed to be terrifying in person, too. Yes.
And he was one out of
looks
many,
scary.
was he? I don't know. He seemed like a sweetheart to me.
Well, at least in Edwards,
really?
they always just talk about he's much scarier in person.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah. Bela Lugosi was part of a whole list of actors. Conrad Veidt, who was in Casablanca, who plays Nazis in a lot of movies. He was in a silent film called The Man Who Laughs, which inspired the look of the Joker, apparently. Batman's a Joker. He was, shortlisted to play the role, but I guess Bela Lugosi really campaigned to play his part, and he won the part. The other interesting thing about this version of Dracula, there were two versions of Dracula being shot at the same time. A Spanish language version and an English language version that's more famous. The Spanish language version was shot with a different director, different cast, but the exact same sets at night when they shot the other version of Dracula during the day.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I prefer the Spanish version.
Early Roger Corman stuff.
I must watch this
version. Well, yeah, they did, because apparently there was the Spanish language audience was very much paid attention to in those days. They used to do that with a lot of films in the early 30s. I actually prefer the Spanish language version.
How dare you?
Even though I think Bela Lugosi's a better Dracula.
It's a classic. It's a classic. All other Draculas are based on this Dracula. It's a classic film. I loved it. Come on.
I really liked Bela Lugosi.
Renfield was so scary.
I don't know. I like
when the woman's laying and he's reaching over the woman. Oh, so good.
I liked Bela Lugosi. That was about it. I'm not saying the film was boring. I was just happy it was short. It was entertaining for what it is. I respect the film, but I was like, I've seen other versions of Dracula. I find Renfield better in other films. In this version, I was like, I was mesmerized by Bela Lugosi, but that was pretty much it.
The dialogue is classic.
It had some good dialogue.
I don't drink wine.
Exactly.
But see, okay,
Children of
Children of the night.
maybe back then that was like poetic, but now it just sounds funny.
Well, it sounds funny because you heard it 100 different times.
Exactly.
Everyone has been like
But
copying
this
Dracula.
is, I'm just stating
film.
my opinion. This is my first time ever watching it. Maybe if I had watched it when I was younger or grew up with it, it would mean more to me. But watching it now, I'm
I
like,
can't believe you've never watched Dracula in your
I've
whole
watched
life.
other Draculas, but I've never watched the 1930s.
Even the
Dracula.
light
Wait,
on
you
the
haven't
eyes.
seen in 1931?
Not before we had
okay,
to watch
sorry,
it for the
misunderstood.
show. I mean, I've seen Bram
Well,
Stoker's.
I'm gonna
I've seen Frank
step
Langella.
in here.
Uh-oh. So what, I'm going to get
And
browbeaten?
I'm going to
Help him
say
out. Help him
that
out.
of all the Universal horrors, I like Dracula the least.
Really?
I used to love it when I was younger, but as I got
I don't
older,
know about you guys.
that was gonna be my gag.
Oh, well, you know.
Dare you?
Just cut it out. You know,
No,
do it
no,
again.
no. I think it's very stagey. I think that, granted, technology at the time. However, Frankenstein was rolled out at the same time, and I think that's a far superior movie.
Well,
It's
James Whale is a better director.
well, the Todd Browning version of Dracula is very stagey. It's very stodgy. There's nothing. They don't do anything with the camera. And
they zoom in.
it comes across as unintentionally hammy.
Right.
You know, in parts where
Well, I do like the ham. I like
I mean,
the light on the
it's an iconic
eyes.
film, and I respect its place. And Bela Lugosi strikes an iconic figure.
Yeah.
Even though that's not the Count as described by Bram Stoker, right? And you're right, the Renfield thing. Well, the Renfield in the book isn't even a major character. I mean, you know, they kind of expanded his roles in the movies, the concurrent like film versions, but in the books doesn't really have that much of a role. He's just an inmate in an insane asylum.
I don't know. I mean, I grew up with this film,
See,
and
that's
every
why.
every other Dracula film is based on this, or takes things from this film. It's got iconic like dialogue. Bela Lugosi is off the charts with his scary business and Hungarian accent. Like, I mean, I think it's a great film. It's like, you know, it's iconic. What's wrong with you guys?
I respect its place.
So do
It's just
I.
not. I don't think it's the best of the films we're going to discuss today.
Oh, well.
I think there are better films in their canon. I will say this: it's interesting that they had a repertoire of actors, right? They had Edward Sloane, who plays Van Helsing, and Dracula shows up in Frankenstein, and Dwight Frye, who plays Renfield, shows up as Fritz in Frankenstein, which we're going to talk about in a second. And you know, Bela Lugosi is the best thing in it, I think.
Yeah.
And it's not boring. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad movie. It's fun to watch. They premiered on Valentine's Day. It was marketed as the weirdest love story ever made.
well, see-
Vincent Price was supposed to be a romantic lead, as was Humphrey Bogart, as was a bunch of other people. They try it.
they're
If it
more
doesn't work,
scary
you go
looking.
the other way.
Well, Humphrey
see-
Bogart did become a romantic lead.
But see, I also
Well,
felt that was what
yeah,
was
But he did
missing.
get his start in a horror film.
Well, he was better as a gangster.
Well,
I always thought.
that's what was missing from this. I guess all the other versions I've seen, there's more of a believable romance. Here, it just felt like, oh, this just happens to be part of the story.
Frankenstein, based on Mary Shelley's classic novel. Apparently there was different scripts out there. Originally, they wanted Bela Lugosi to play the monster.
That's right.
Right?
He declined. That's
However, what people don't realize is that the monster he would have played is not the monster we wound up seeing in the eventual movie. It was a different script. He was more of a homicidal maniac kind of character, apparently. Lugosi
That
didn't want to
fits.
do it because it just gave him no, depth at all. So even though the lore is that he turned down what was an iconic role that Karloff did so much with it, the role he actually turned down wasn't the role that the character that you actually see in the resulting film.
Edward
That's
rolled
because
with.
one director was attached to it. Universal wanted to bring in James Whale from England in order to entice him so they could work with him. He insisted that he wanted to do Frankenstein. And then he took the project, completely rewrote the script, made it his own thing, to the chagrin of the studio, but they let him get away with it anyway. And the result is a classic. Launched the career of one Boris Karloff. And amongst other, Colin Clive became a popular leading man, the actor who plays Dr. Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah. He did a good job.
And you saw the
thing in it.
return, as I mentioned before, Dwight Frye as Fritz. Character's not called Igor, people. Igor doesn't show up until much later in the series. This character's called Fritz, his hunchback. There is no Fritz in the novels. There never was a hunchback assistant in the novels. This is something they made up for the movie. In fact, the movie isn't very faithful to the book at all, which is like the tradition of Universal at the time.
Yeah.
Everything was pretty much like made modern day for then. And the story is a very simplified take on Mary Shelley's novel. However, you have what is probably for me one of the most exciting parts of the movie is the makeup. To this day, that makeup on the Frankenstein monster is astounding by Jack Pierce. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And Karloff is phenomenal in that role with no lines. It's all expression. It's all body movements.
It's all this.
Apparently, he was in a lot of pain when he did that. And I think it's an incredibly well-directed film.
Oh yeah, James Whale is he's an amazing director.
amazing.
Yeah.
And I that's what I was alluding to before. I think it's a far better film than Todd Browning's Dracula.
Frankenstein, I enjoyed a lot more than I enjoyed Dracula. This one I've seen previously, so watching it again was a particular joy. I actually like Colin Clive more than anybody else in this film because he has this hysterical quality to his performance, and it's just to me more captivating than anything else in the film. I mean, I like the rest of the film, but that's the thing that sticks out in my mind throughout the whole film. I mean,
Well, I feel like the story is always sort of about Dr. Frankenstein.
Well,
And, I mean,
and
there's
the
the
monster, but yeah, it's
but
more.
the whole it's alive thing.
Yeah, but I mean, it could also easily, you could get distracted by the monster and totally forget the main character of the film. And this, I was all Colin Clive, and and then when you hear in real life that he drank heavily when he was making this film, that might have been what also helped his performance, because he might have actually been confused as to what was going on half the time. I don't know. I wasn't
He's
on
actually
set.
drunk right now to help his performance.
No, because actually I'm talking better than I usually do. But I just...
He's actually high in the ether. We had to put this guy to sleep.
Yeah.
'Cause,
But I mean...
Sorry, pal.
Anyways, you can continue.
but I really enjoyed this film more.
We have no polls.
Definitely more than Dracula. He's probably falling asleep listening to my review.
I like the wacky introduction.
Yeah.
When Edward Sloan comes out from behind a curtain and explains that what you're about to see is not a true story. Well, this film was so successful, they demanded a sequel, and James Whale didn't want to do that. So to appease James Whale, they said you can do any project you want as long as you do Bride of Frankenstein. And so he agreed to that, and he also agreed to it on the terms that if I do the sequel, I have complete creative control on this. It's going to be the film I want to make. The result is what I consider to be a masterpiece, The Bride of Frankenstein.
Which is my favorite out of all the films we're going to talk about today.
I freaking love this film.
Oh, I'm so bored. I was like, get
Come on, it had
Amy.
more comedy. It was a little...
It's an
It's
intentional-
campy. You like
And
campy.
Mel Brooks made fun of a lot of scenes in this movie in Young Frankenstein, even though he was basically parodying a parody. Because there's a lot of intentional humor in this
Exactly.
film. A lot of intentional humor. But it is, the set pieces are phenomenal. Elsa Lancaster,
Plays
the wife
two
of
roles.
Charles Lawton.
No, I didn't know.
Charles
I was
Lawton's
about to
wife,
say,
yeah.
Cool.
She plays two roles. She plays Mary Shelley and the bride.
Which I thought is interesting, considering this is supposed to be a parody, that he kind of ties the original tale's author.
Oh, and it's
into
hilarious.
it.
You have these people from the early 1800s telling the story that's set in the 1930s.
Yeah.
Basically. But I mean, why even worry about that? And then you have the wonderful Dr. Pretorius character. Frankenstein versus the Wolfman. I'm getting way ahead of ourselves.
Oh,
here.
Okay, I didn't.
But that was the one film that Bela Lugosi finally played the monster.
Yeah.
Okay, against Lon Chaney Jr.'s Wolfman. But there was
is
numerous
an adorable
sequels.
movie.
Glenn
I
Strange
have
he
to see
was
it.
was
I've
a
never seen it.
popular actor who used to do a lot of westerns. He wound up taking over the Frankenstein monster role, and eventually in Son of Frankenstein and The Ghost of Frankenstein,
Jeez.
Bela Lugosi made his introduction
It's all about the
playing the
sequel.
role of Igor or however you want to pronounce it. That's where he comes from, is those two sequels.
Was the same actress who was kind of a gypsy screaming in the beginning, was she also in The Invisible Man, directed
Yes.
by James? Okay, I just
Playing
wanted to
almost
make
the exact same
Exactly,
role.
I
That
just
was
wanted to
also
make sure.
directed by James Whale.
God, I
I
wanted
know.
her to die.
Which
I
do we
just
want to go
wanted her
back and
die.
talk about that briefly? It wasn't really an assigned movie, but we could just. You
What?
guys said you watched it.
Yeah, I
Invisible
watched
Man?
The
Oh, Invisible Man was
Yes.
amazing. Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I didn't know how to feel about it
James
'cause-
Whale again.
Yeah, but
Yo.
the first 20 minutes feel more like a comedy by the broadness of everything, and then all of a sudden it gets so serious as
But
he
that's
goes
why
crazy.
it's so great. It starts
But-
as a comedy and then it becomes this
I mean,
homicidal maniac.
I liked it, but it just kept throwing me off. Like, how am I supposed to feel about
the
this
giggling
character?
is he's like, first he takes your hat off and then he pushes you, then he wrecks a train.
Yeah, but I mean, come on. Like, he pushes the guy. He falls down 3 stairs and he's like bleeding. Like, and the wife's just
Yeah, I love how he
She's
makes
annoying.
no attempt to be stealthy. It's like he makes no attempt to be subtle and lay low.
Yeah.
No,
And
it's-
he announces to the world that he's a homicidal maniac and he's invisible, and
Yeah.
even though he's running and hiding. But I think it's a very fun movie. It's not a very long film. It's just over an hour.
And the funny thing is, I kept falling asleep watching it.
Oh,
And
that's
Claude
what I feel
Rains
about
is a
Bride of
lot of
Frankenstein.
fun, even though we don't see his face until
Yeah.
the very end of the film. It's interesting for the special effects.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I am amazed.
It's impressed for what at the time. what was
Yeah,
done.
it's
Absolutely.
really hard to do what they were doing then because everything is black and white. I mean, we see this virtual set. Obviously, we shot this in front of a green screen.
Shh, don't tell him the secret.
Sorry.
We're actually standing
But
here.
the point is that you need that color green that you can key out so that everything else stays in. All they had was black and white. So you're keying out black, you're keying out anything that's black that's in their face and their costume. And so they had to be very careful how they shoot that stuff. And they had to re-roll the film and film it again on the same film. There was no compositing in those days. It's an amazing effect. Son
sir.
of a Universal icon, Lon Chaney Sr.'s Jr., Lon Chaney Jr., the son of Lon Chaney
Okay.
Sr., obviously, made his big name as the Wolfman.
I love that movie. The Wolfman's so fun.
Now, Chaney Jr. actually was a pretty popular actor at the time. He got a lot of notice for like A Mice and Men and stuff like that. But this was the film that launched his career and unfortunately typecast him for the rest of his life.
Yep.
Also stars the Invisible Man, Claude Rains. Plays his father in this. The protagonist, his name is Lawrence Talbot, and he returns to his home and somewhere in England, and he wanders onto some sort of gypsy compound. He gets bitten by a wolf, and it turns out that's Bela Lugosi. And the gypsy marks him with the pentagram, all that stuff, and the rest is just craziness. I like The Wolfman a lot. I think it's a very classy production. It's not my favorite Universal horror film. But I think they put a lot of care and respect into the presentation of the film and the performances and stuff like that. The look of the Wolfman is considered iconic, but we've seen so many better variations.
Since
of the
then.
werewolf.
Oh, yes.
Well,
It's kind of hard to.
But it's
Take it
with werewolf
seriously.
movies, it's all about the transition, and the transition that they did with him, just with like the cross dissolves, is just
Right.
so fun
It's
and
a
so
fun-
well done. And again, these are like iconic films.
I'm going to shock you both with this statement. I enjoyed the film.
Whoa.
One thing bothered me, and it's the star of the film, Lon Chaney Jr.
Okay.
It's something about his delivery and his size. It distracted me. I could believe him more as the wolf, but whenever he was trying to play, I guess, a normal gentleman, it just felt out of his wheelhouse for some reason.
Really?
Because I
Well,
guess
he wasn't. He was playing He was playing a guy who had been in America for a while.
I know, but it's just, I don't know, something about like his size. He just seems to me he would be a more physical actor than more of a gentleman type character, which he was supposed to be playing.
See, I definitely saw him as a fish out of water type, and I thought that was intentional.
Oh, because I'm just like,
It kind of played into the fears of being in a foreign element that you're not familiar with, and
Which is also big in werewolf movies from
Yeah.
there on out too.
and the ridiculous cane part, he's like so proud of this cane, and it's like, it's really ugly. I couldn't imagine like anybody being proud of this cane. I told you, it's the little nitpicks
that
with
Kane
me.
did him in. Spoiler.
I know, but it's just like,
Which I found unexpected the first time I saw a film, because I always thought Silver Bullet.
Yeah.
Not in The Wolfman.
no, he gets beaten to death basically
Right.
with a cane.
Well, but the movie's so sad. Like, he's a sad monster, whereas, Dracula is pretty psyched about it. Frankenstein gets that sad, but the Wolfman is really like, oh, this is like a terrible thing that is
Yeah, I
happening.
can't
And whenever
help-
he made appearances in the future, like Universal sort of monster mix movies, he was always portrayed as the anti-hero of all those
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah.
And he would always die at the end, and somehow they figured out a way to bring him back.
I didn't even like the remake of The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro. So
Which was an odd remake. I like the idea going into how they decided to remake it. Decided to make it a period piece, more of a period piece than the original. There's certain elements I kind of like the idea that one of the main characters was basically the Chief Inspector Abilene, who investigated Jack the Ripper murders in real life. I thought that was an interesting thing. Although I'm not clear at the end, did he become a werewolf?
I don't remember.
Because he was attacked at the end, but he survived the attack. The Mummy.
Oh, yeah, I've
I
seen
watched
it.
it.
Oh, you did watch it?
I
Okay.
watched it.
Not
Okay.
recently, but I've seen it. Yeah.
Well,
I watched
let's
it
discuss
recently.
that a little bit because we're going back into the 30s because I forgot about that film.
Okay.
For me, it's like the least memorable of the ones we're discussing in a lot of ways. In fact,
I
for
can
me,
see.
it was
Did you
the
see
most.
the sequel first?
Yes.
But yes,
Interesting.
but that's only because it's not really. You grow up with this image of the mummy, like this shambling thing and like bandages. That's not the Mummy. More like they just basically stole the idea from their Dracula movie and made him a mummy. Where like they find him in Egypt and they bring him to London, whatever, and the bandages are off, and he just wanders around looking like a normal guy, just old, right? But he hypnotizes people to his will.
Well, the thing you said about the
That's the
Dracula, the eyes, I thought it was more effective here when they would go into the clothes. Because here's this decrepit, scary-looking old man, and he's coming at the camera slowly, and that actually more made me shiver than anything like Boris Karloff when he would do the same as Dracula.
House of Frankenstein, which is my favorite of the mixed monsters ones.
I didn't see that one.
Boris Karloff is in it, but he doesn't play the monster. Boris Karloff plays this scientist who steals a Frankenstein monster body from a traveling carnival and tries to rejuvenate it. At the same time, he tries to rejuvenate. He gets into this blood pact with Dracula, and Dracula's played by the great, the Carradine father. The father of the Carradine. Is it David Carradine?
I was going to say, I think so, David Carradine Sr.
Yeah, and he's actually looks great as Dracula. He actually looks closer to the concept of Dracula in Stoker's novel because he has a mustache and longer hair.
Okay.
But every time he opens up his mouth, it's like this Midwestern accent, which is kind of odd. Dracula, Frankenstein, to a certain extent, The Mummy, even The Bride of Frankenstein, these were considered A-list movies at the time.
Okay.
There's another great horror film that came out by Universal at that time, which isn't really lumped in with the monster stuff, only because there's no real monsters in it, and it's such a weird film, but that's The Black Cat,
Oh, right.
which features
Never saw
both
it.
Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. Bela Lugosi actually plays the hero in it. Karloff is actually the villain, and Karloff's character is based on Aleister Crowley. This film is freaking nuts.
Yeah,
If you
it's
haven't
really
seen
weird.
it, check
I
it
gotta
out.
see it.
It's nuts. It was directed by Edgar Ulmer, who directed Detour, that we discussed in our film noir
Yes.
show. There was a bunch of these also sort of odd horror films they were putting out that didn't really have monsters in them, but they were kind of mood pieces. But we didn't get another iconic new monster character until the 1950s. And up to this point,
What about Creature from the Black Lagoon?
that's what we're going to talk about.
That's
Creature
what
from
I
Black
thought he
Lagoon
was
in
going
the
for.
1950s. Up to that point, it was mostly they're just rolling out sequels to their other properties, and it went from A to B to C. Actually, the films became cheaper and cheaper, and became double build features and all that stuff. And then 3D happened in the 1950s, the first phase of
Damn it.
3D popularity. And Universal wanted to roll out a 3D monster movie, and they came up with a Creature from the Black Lagoon, which is sort of partially sci-fi.
Do you know that is the first film I have ever seen in my life? Was Creature from the
Really?
Black Lagoon?
Really?
Interesting.
Yeah.
And
I think
how'd
I
that
was
come about?
5 years
There's a
old.
good story there, I bet.
Well, my dad has a pretty good sense of humor, so we thought that would be a good thing. The second film I've ever seen was Rocky Horror, so that probably says a lot about my dad. There's a lot of pictures of me smoking cigarettes when I was like this big. Yeah,
Oh, really?
it's just good parenting. Yeah, no, but I remember being really young and trying to catch the fish, and I wasn't really scared of it or anything. I just thought it was just really, really, really cool.
See, I did wind up seeing it in 3D, like in my early 20s. They showed it on my college campus in 3D, but what they call anaglyph 3D, which is the red and blue glasses.
Yeah, same.
Because a lot of those films weren't released that way. That's a cliche, but they were Polaroid 3D, which is a better 3D technology than the red and blue. But I think the first time I saw Creature from Black Lagoon was on TV, like on Chiller Theater or something like that.
Right.
And it's a cool film.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a really cool film.
It's really well made, actually. I think. What, you hated it? Look at this
No,
look.
I'm just.
Look at him.
You guys, I guess you were
like
just saying
this-
it's cool.
I have
so
to
I
do
was
this
like,
too, because I'm not sure we got a
Yes.
pulse here either.
Can
I'm
you
like-
check him?
It was very campy to me, and I don't know
50s.
if that was the intention while I was watching it. Since it's supposed to be a Universal horror film, I thought I was going to take it a little more seriously because it felt like a movie you would watch on Mystery Science Theater 3000. Like,
Okay.
I mean,
I didn't think it was that.
so.
I
it wasn't. The effects weren't that bad or anything.
I didn't think it was like cheesy.
But I just felt like half the time there should be jokes being made about.
Well, it's very 1950s atomic age sci-fi / horror.
Exactly.
Well,
Like,
there's
okay.
a message
Right,
behind
and there's like the
horror.
handsome scientist or
Yeah.
archaeologist.
Yeah,
or
because I felt like
biologist.
one
Girls
was
in
like the
bikinis.
professor
Girls in
from
bikinis.
Gilligan's Island. It felt like one of the scientists was. And then when they're like trying to get out, and it's like, oh no, this log is blocking us. How are we ever going to get out? And I'm like, seriously?
I didn't see, because there's so many films you could really point the finger at and say, okay, these are worst case scenarios.
Okay,
Most of them.
yeah,
I didn't
but
think it's so
I
much.
You
guess
could do that with
I'm-
Saw. Like,
Ran
really,
that
you're
bad.
gonna
Well,
chainsaw
I'm not
I
gonna
just think
praise
so,
Saw.
but there's like fun elements to it, like the concept that the creature is a missing link.
Yeah.
You know, apparently we evolved from fish. You know,
Yeah.
all that stuff. And
And you know, like the thing when the guy's on the bed and his arm is just in there, and it's like,
That's
oh
funny.
no,
I
oh
agree.
no.
That scene is hilarious. And no one's paying
Exactly.
attention.
Especially in 3D.
Poor guy, yeah. And that guy gets like whacked around a lot in the film. He really
just-
has no lines. He just smokes a pipe, and then he gets like wasted or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's just stuck in that cot for the rest of the movie. I think the underwater photography is very well done.
Yeah, that
I
is
think
well
that
done.
costume is amazing.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
It's a very impressive costume. It's impressive that apparently the guy, Rico Browning, I think his name was, he had to stay underwater for so long with no breathing apparatus or anything like that.
It's like when you hear all the jokes about Aquaman out of the Justice League, you have Batman, you know, Superman. Then it's like, oh, it's Aquaman. That is how that's how this film. Yeah, that's how this film feels amongst the others. It's like you have Dracula, you have the Wolfman, you have Frankenstein. Then you got the creature from the Black Lagoon.
I have
That
a
I've
great
seen.
deal of affection for Abbott and Costello, meet Frankenstein. I always will. I just love that film.
Did you see it when you were 5?
I saw it when I was 5. I saw it over and over again. In fact, it was like Pavlov's dog. Whenever they would show Abbott and Costello movies every weekend, I knew what film it was going to be depending upon the Universal logo.
Yeah.
Like they had like a darker one. You knew that was going to be one of their monster ones. I was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, this is the Frankenstein one. Yeah, this is the one I want to watch. Because they also did like Abbott and Costello meet Jekyll and Hyde, which is okay. Boris Karloff was in that. He plays Dr. Jekyll. And they did another one with Karloff. Oh, they did a Mummy one. Abbott and Costello met
The Mummy one was pretty funny.
I've only actually seen the Wolfman one.
None of them are anywhere near as good as Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. That's the best one. That's the one that has the Wolfman in it. They're
Okay,
all
I've seen that one.
And
Yeah.
Bela Lugosi and Lon Chaney reprise their roles, and Glenn Strange plays the monster in this one, as he had played in the sequels as well. So that wraps up this special Halloween episode of special Halloween episode of Try CPR. This special
That's all
Halloween
you.
episode of Universal Horror. And coming to you from the castle laboratory in the basement, or maybe it's in a tower. I haven't decided yet. I'll figure it out in post, folks. You know, because that's what
think
we
he's
do.
He's
gone.
gonna fix it.
But thank you for have a happy Halloween. Don't take any candy from strangers, even though that's what Halloween's all about. And yeah,
Happy Halloween, everybody.
happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Look out for razor blades. Ah!
It's alive.
Yeah.
What?
Somebody do something about the interior design in this place. It's a little bright.